Hey, Bruce. Hey, thanks for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time out. Um, like I said before we started this, we really tried to do this, gosh, probably like a month or two ago, but then the holidays and everything, and the hurricane relief and all that stuff, we got quite busy. Just weren't able to do it, so we're able to do it now. So again, thanks for taking the time out and coming on.
I'm really excited to be here. I know we tried a few times, like you said, but I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, all in timing. So,
Yeah, God's time.
yes, exactly. So the way I like to run this, the way I do these podcasts is I'm just going to give a kind of like a brief bio of you. Maybe you can catch up if anything that I missed that you want to put in there. Then after that, I'm going to come off the cuff with a question or two, just kind of a fun random question, and then we'll kind of leave it up to you to go from pretty much where you were born and to where you are now, and we'll just hit everything in between.
Right. Sounds good.
Okay. So, all right. So I got you enlisted in the Air Force as a combat controller in 1986. You spent 30 years retired as a Chief Master Sergeant E9. During those 30 years, you were a master parachutist with over 400 jumps to include 3 combat jumps, one of which was the first jump into Afghanistan. You were an instructor at the 3-level combat control school. You were superintendent of multiple squadrons, command chief of 2 operational wings, and then the combat control training pipeline manager. And that pretty much kind of closed that out as active duty time. Afterwards, you became the director of training for the Special Tactics Training Squadron. And then now you're the director of staff at the 2-4 Special Operations Wing. And I threw this one in here. You're a speaker at men's groups and churches. And then last, but definitely not least, you're a Christian, you're a husband, and you're a father. So does that pretty much sum you up?
Man, you covered it. Follower of Christ and kingdom worker, and the last 2 are probably the most important to me: the husband, father, grandfather, and follower of Christ. But yeah, you captured it all.
Good. Yeah, the speaker at the Christian church for men's groups or whatever. I had a friend call me. You literally probably came to the church I was attending probably a week or 2 after I had PCS'd out, and he was like, "Dude, there's this guy." And I was like, "No way!" So that was pretty cool. I got to watch it, and I've spread that video to the guys in my shop at the office. A lot of guys, a lot of men following Christ these days.
Oh yeah.
And so we sit around, we talk about it. I'm like, "Hey, I've got this awesome video. Some of them know you, and we'll talk offline of who they are."
Right.
And then so I'd shared that video. But yeah, man, awesome.
Yeah, you nailed it.
All right. Well, so I like to do like fun questions, just kind of gather, see where you're at. So I would say, of all the places that you've been, to include where you're at now, if you could choose one place to eat at, just like, and that's the only place like you had to go to, where would that be, or what would that be?
Oh man, I would say Okinawa. And they had this little place. I'm probably going to get the name wrong. I think it was called Kitty Kayasen or something like that. But it was American food and Okinawan food and Japanese food, and just great sushi and great meals and fun times. And the family enjoyed it as well. So that would probably be the place I'd pick for sure.
All right, nice. And so I bet the sushi and the food there is so much better than these places over here. Never been.
It's amazing. You get spoiled when you're over there, and you come back and you try to match it, and it's hard to find.
Yeah, I could imagine. Well, that's good. All right. And then one of the other questions I like to ask is, so being on deployments, right? We've both been out of the house a lot, sitting in bunk rooms or whatever. I tend to have a laptop with a bunch of movies. And most people do. So is there a movie that you would turn on while deployed that you could, or stateside, doesn't matter, that you could just turn on and like be heads down, trying to go to sleep, doing something where you don't have to always kind of like, something's going on, you just already like that's your go-to
Yeah.
type movie.
So, I mean, this is an answer that all guys are going to give you. The Braveheart movie. Uh, my wife jokes around because I can be doing stuff in the house on a Saturday, and if the TV comes on and I'm flipping through the channels and Braveheart is on, there's something about it. My boys, we have to watch it. Like we have to finish watching it. So,
Yeah,
it kind of reminds me of home when I see the movie, even though, it's not about home or anything. But
yeah,
yeah, I enjoy that movie. And I think most guys do. But it is has a special movie for me.
yeah. Well, I mean, when you watch it, like when you're gone, it's still kind of reminiscent of home. You're
Yeah,
like, yeah, me and the
absolutely.
boys watch it.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely, yeah. Because there's movies that I know that me and my kids watch, and so it's like
Yeah.
kind of takes you back home.
Yeah. If you can
That's
find
good.
that one movie that the entire family enjoys, you gotta stick with it.
Yeah, and
Go
good luck
back
with
to it.
that
Yeah,
because
right.
not everybody likes everything the same. Awesome, awesome. Well, that's good. And Braveheart's a great movie.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson. As a matter of fact, I was just watching him on Fox News earlier.
My
Uh,
wife was telling me about that. I didn't see it, but I'm gonna watch it later on. But I heard he was on there talking.
yeah, yeah, definitely. The little comment he makes about Gavin Newsom's pretty funny. You have to
I'll
see it.
have to
So
I'll have to check it out.
perfect. Okay, cool. So I guess now we kind of leave the floor open to you,
Okay.
and just get the background of who is Bruce Dixon, and
Right.
where were you from, and what was that like?
Okay. Yeah. So my dad was in the army, and so we moved around. I was an army brat until about the fourth grade. So we lived in Germany, we lived in Texas, we ended up in Washington State, and then after he retired in Washington State, we moved to North Carolina, and that's where we settled down in a town called Bessemer City, which is closest town that you would know is Charlotte, North Carolina. It's about 20 minutes from Charlotte, and so I grew up there and spent a lot of summers with my grandparents. They were incredible. They lived in Gaffney, South Carolina, so I spent a lot of time there. My brother and I would go there and just hang out. And they always were at church, always at church. And so when I was 8 years old, I went up in front of the church just because I wanted to please my grandparents. It really wasn't that I had a relationship with Christ yet. It was about going up and just making them happy.
Yeah,
So, I always tell that story. I got saved at 8, but not really saved at 8. Later on in life at 13, I realized, what it meant. And that's when I dedicated my life to Christ. But I grew up in that environment. My parents were Christians too. And so kind of grew up around that. And it was a stable part of our life growing up. And then played sports, was pretty athletic, but didn't excel at any of the sports to be able to go and do anything with that.
yeah,
And then when I got out of high school, I went to work for this Freightliner truck company. Actually, my brother still works there. Great job. Went to college a little bit,
yeah.
but it just wasn't for me. And I had a serious relationship with this girl. We'd been dating for a long time, and it was kind of a toxic relationship.
Mm,
And so just one day, I just decided that I was going to go and see the recruiter. And
nice.
I went in there. I talked to the recruiter, and for some reason, I was stuck on air traffic control. Like I want to be in air traffic control. I don't know how I got stuck on that, but I went to the recruiter,
Yeah,
and he said, "Hey, what about this combat control? It's air traffic control school, but you get to jump out of planes and stuff."
yeah,
And I was sold after that. I'm like, "Yeah, let's go."
yeah,
Had no idea what I was getting into.
yeah,
But I was ready to go, and it was just a short period of time that they were allowing recruits to come in as combat controllers, kind of guaranteed.
okay,
They stopped it because if you got, if you failed the pipeline, you could get out of the Air Force, and they didn't want that. But I came in, absolutely loved it. Every part of the pipeline, the camaraderie that you get, the brotherhood that you get going through the pipeline, and then getting to a team.
yeah,
I didn't know if I was going to stay in the military. That wasn't the plan, is, hey, let's see what this is about. But every time that it came up for, to reenlist or get out, I was
yeah,
loving what I was doing. And it was a life for me. So I stayed in there. And
yeah.
And then so it's funny. My wife hates when I tell this story because it's kind of a weird story if you think about it. But her mom was my Sunday school teacher. So
Okay.
when I so they lived in Dallas, North Carolina, which is about 7 miles from my parents' house. And so a good friend of mine, we would go to church together. You know, we would party, and then
Yeah.
we'd get to church on Sunday. But we would go to that church and still tried to stay close to the Lord, even though I wasn't really living the life. You know,
Yeah.
and so she was 7 years younger than me. Really didn't even I knew her in the church, but not really.
Right.
But her mom was my Sunday school teacher, and a couple people from the church, including her mom. When I went into the Air Force, they would write letters to me and stuff to check on me, and I would write back. And then one day I'm out in Charlotte at a bar, and this girl walks up to me and starts talking to me. I have no idea who she is, and
Yeah.
it's my wife, Lori. We ended up, I went to church that next day and saw everybody, and we ended up dating, and the rest is history. We got married, 3 kids, and 3 amazing kids. So
Yeah.
it's been pretty cool. And
Sweet.
her parents, they're incredible Christian people, great example, just like my parents. But I think that she jokes around sometimes that her mom, likes me better than she likes her. And so I'm the favorite son-in-law. I'm the only son-in-law, but
Yeah.
it's a pretty good relationship that we have.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. It's good to hear fun stories like that,
Yeah,
of how you met your wife, um, and who knew, so many years ago that that would be your, the
yeah,
lady you spend the rest of your life with. But
yeah,
before we go on, man, there's a lot in there I kind of want to unpack. I got some
yeah, yeah,
questions
yeah,
for you on the
yeah,
backside. So I think I'll go with Gaffney first. So
yeah.
Gaffney, I think you and I have a mutual friend who's been long retired. I think retired twice now. Who's from Gaffney? Who always talked about Gaffney. You know what I'm talking about?
Ron Childers.
Oh yes, sir. Over on Childress.
Yes, yes,
Um, I remember he came the day before we graduated, and he was
yeah.
like, "All right, anybody from South Carolina, raise your hand." And I raised my hand, and he's like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I'm like, "Charleston." He's like, "That ain't South Carolina." And he pushed it off. I'm
That
like,
sounds
"Yes,
like
sir."
Ron. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Ron's a character. I love him. We talk sometimes when we get together about Gaffney, and his parents and my grandfather probably hung out together.
Yeah.
Pretty small town, but yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah. I like it. The big old peach as a water
Yes,
tower.
that's right.
Okay, so with two ties to South Carolina and North Carolina, I've got to ask this sports question. Like, who would be your NFL team? Yeah,
Yeah. So I grew up as a Rams fan before the Panthers, and
yeah,
so and that was when they were in Los Angeles, not St. Louis. And so I was a huge Rams fan. I loved watching football,
yeah,
especially NFL football. So I would get upset when my team would lose. Well,
yeah,
when the Panthers came into town, and I started getting interested in Carolina, I had to switch over. I
yeah,
still like the Rams, but I had to make them my number one team. And it's been, there's been some really bad years that we've had,
yeah,
but we've had some good years too. My brother gave me tickets to the NFC Championship game when they played Arizona and they won.
yeah,
But I think the trick is I had to go up and pick up my son. He was in Huntington College in Alabama. I picked him up, drove all the way up. We spent like the night at my grandparents' house or at my mother and father-in-law's house. We
yeah,
went to the game, and then I had to drive him back for a test in school. And so basically, we stayed there for the entire game and the ceremonies after. Luke
yeah,
Kuechly got 2 interceptions. It was an amazing game. Great bonding time with my son. And then he slept the whole way back, and I was drinking monsters and coffee and sticking my head out the window trying to stay awake. But it's one of my favorite memories with going to watch a sports team and stuff.
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So growing up, I've always been in Atlanta, and then
Yeah,
when the Panthers came, I never went over because I always used the excuse they're in North Carolina, I'm in South
yeah,
Carolina.
right.
Um, so I was pretty mad this past weekend when we lost
Sorry.
to the Panthers. And I say we because I buy their stuff, so I
Yeah,
support the team.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely,
my
100%.
money my money pays their salary.
I was torn. I was torn on that game actually because I was, it's okay, you're going to hurt yourself because they went from a number 6 draft pick to a number 8 draft pick. So I'm like, do you really need to win this game? But I'm glad they're playing good football at the end of the year. Rice looks
Yeah.
pretty good now.
Yeah, he was looking pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's a discussion because one of the guys I work with is a Panthers fan, and so
Yeah.
I told him today because we've gotten some pretty bad weather, and so I finally got to link up with all the guys today, and I was like, I didn't want to even talk to you over the weekend. I was like,
I get like that
but
too.
yeah. We shouldn't. I mean, but
Shouldn't.
it's that passion.
Yeah.
So you said you played sports in school.
Yeah.
What was your sport?
Probably basketball.
Basketball.
I hate to say it. I mean, I played tennis too, which, like people make fun of that, but I was a pretty good tennis player, basketball player. It was track, tennis, or baseball during that time, and I wasn't fast enough to be great at track. I did that for a little bit, but I ended up playing tennis
Yeah,
and basketball, and played football a little bit, but I definitely wasn't a football star.
gotcha. Was your town pretty small or
Oh, small
small
town, very
town?
small town. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I started working in high school instead of playing sports, so I kind of made that shift to make money instead of. I wish I hadn't made. I tell my kids all the time. We kind of had a rule with my boys, like you're going to play 2 sports, all the way through high school. You don't need to work. We're going to provide the money that you need. You should be enjoying high school, that time in your life, and enjoying sports and stuff, and
yeah,
doing well in your academics. So, but I had a choice. My parents gave me a choice, and I decided to work and not play games and stuff. And I regretted that.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. I mean, but
Yeah.
at the time, it was something that you felt like you had to do. So
Right, right. Had that car and the clothes and everything. More
yeah, I
important to
think
me, I guess.
yeah, that's the biggest thing, man. It showed responsibility, I guess. Helped you
Yeah,
with with being an adult. You got kids these days who, nothing against it by any
yeah,
means, but their parents, drive them around everywhere, and and they get into their parents do everything for them, and they get
yeah.
into the real world, and it's like they expect that, and it's like, look, dude, it's not like that,
Right. Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with it because I'm pretty sure we did it with some of our kids,
Hmm.
and we're starting to see that now, like that's not the way this is gonna work, man. Like,
You
talking to
learn.
each other. Yeah,
You learn. You learn,
yeah,
and you still learn. I'm 60 now,
yeah,
and I've got all 3 boys are grown up, but I'm still learning as a father. Make mistakes every day, but keep
yeah,
trying.
yeah. It is. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's never ending. And then you look at your wife and you're like, how do you get it right so much?
Hmm.
You know?
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I'm with you there, man. Still learning every day.
Yeah.
Um, so what was life like then, in a super small town in high school?
Well, I mean, sports. Like I said, basketball. If I would leave on a weekend to go play basketball or go, do something and be gone all day. We didn't worry about somebody grabbing kids and stuff back then.
Yeah,
So I went all around the city, played a lot of basketball, swimming, and just hanging out. So it was a pretty good environment. I didn't focus on my academics too much. I did well in school, but I didn't really try.
yeah,
Looking back again, I feel like I could have done a lot better if I would have just been focused. But I didn't have. I was the youngest in my family, and so my older brother and my older sister. By the time that I was, my parents, when I was old enough for them to kind of discipline me, they kind of were just do whatever you want to do, and so that probably wasn't the best thing. I
yeah,
made decisions that I probably shouldn't have made, but it worked out.
yeah. You live and you learn, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Um, yeah, I think my youngest is getting away with that right now.
Yeah,
Like you're just too tired. You're like, okay,
yeah,
sure. Here, have some ice cream. I know it's 9 o'clock at night.
yeah. Just do it.
Well, that's funny. Okay, so through high school, okay. So one thing I did want to talk to you about is you said you went to church with your grandparents at 8, and you got up
Yeah,
and you're doing things, and I'm kind of in the same shoes as you. So I
yeah,
I do remember church. I think the earliest, excuse me, is when I was 8 years old. Going to church. I remember Sunday school talking to the teachers and asking about what it meant to be saved. And I do remember being saved and getting baptized. Um, but then, like you said, it really wasn't until later in life did it really mean something?
Right.
What was that change for you in that from 8 to, what you say, 13?
Yeah. So, I mean, I stopped trying to please my grandparents and make it about them, and I started realizing it needs to be about the Lord and His sacrifice.
Yeah.
And even though I say 13, because that's when I really felt the Holy Spirit. I
Hmm.
really felt the change. I was emotional and overwhelmed with that feeling that you get. That it's a glorious feeling, but also a scary feeling
Yeah.
when you have the Holy Spirit come on you. And so that I just knew. However, I can tell you that there's a lot of times in my life, especially in the military as a combat controller in special tactics, and before I was married, that you couldn't look at me and say that guy's a Christian. I was more of a secret agent Christian,
Yeah.
doing whatever I wanted to do. So saved at 13 for sure, but a backslider. In spiritual highs and lows a lot. Um, for most of my adult life, and I think a lot of us go through that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that that you're like a secret agent Christian, because that's something I want to get into later on once we start talking about your career in the teams.
Right, right.
Because I know that, as I was getting ready to retire, guys would come to me and be like, "Hey, uh, so I heard you're a Christian," and but we would go to like the ready room, and
Right.
people would tell me that. I'm like, that's pretty cool, understanding, getting that reputation of of being the man of God, a
Mhm.
man of God, not the man of God, but a man of
Yeah.
God.
Right.
And having other dudes come up like, well, what does this mean, man? And so, but I definitely want to dig into that for sure,
Okay.
and see how it was from your eyes on the teams. But
Yeah,
but yeah,
because I have
that's
a lot of conversations on that with guys now. Well, not a lot, but sometimes have conversations, and I can tell them my experience of how I did it wrong, and hopefully they learn from mistakes that I've made and others have made to show that they are a strong Christian. Bold as a lion was the talk that I did when I went up to Colorado that you talked about.
yeah.
Being bold as a lion, bold as a Christian is the way we're supposed to be, and sometimes that's hard, especially in an environment that in the military.
It is. It's definitely hard, especially nowadays. And
Yeah.
that's I guess kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast,
Yeah.
was to get guys like you, me, other guys in the military, guys that have done our jobs, um, and be like, no, there are Christian men out there, and
Yeah.
it's like you don't have to be the secret agent. You don't have to, you not say anything. There are ways to do it. I get it. This military these days, in the society that we live in,
Yeah.
I feel is like, if you say anything Christian related, you're hated on.
Hmm.
um and with the military, I still see it today. It's just, the whole month of June, right? It's a pride month, and it's like
Yeah.
you go into the BXs or the PXs, and and you
Right.
see these big pride flags. It's like, that's not what we're about. You know what I mean? That's not
Right.
um but if you speak out, about Christianity, then
Yeah.
and then you get looked at.
In trouble. Yeah. You're in
Yeah,
trouble.
yeah. So that's why I'm hoping this, one of the main reasons, this podcast kind of gets out to the guys, and maybe it'll find somebody that it'll touch them and be like, okay, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah, but
That's kingdom work. That's good. That's good kingdom work, man. Keep doing it.
yeah, thanks. I hope it does. I know of a couple guys at my church have heard it, and they're like, oh wow, man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know I'm reaching my local community,
Yeah.
guys that I know. So I just hope this makes it out and reaches other people,
Yeah.
um, outside of my reach,
Right.
if that makes sense.
It
Um,
does.
But all right, well, hey, before once I want to go ahead and get ready to take a break, but
Okay.
when we get back, we've kind of talked about your growing up in high school
Yeah.
and all that, and then you talked about, you just, you're in a toxic relationship, and you're just like, I'm going to join the military.
Right.
So when we get off back from the break, I like to kind of jump in right there, and start from the time that you decided, like, well, I'm going to go see a recruiter, and then we'll just press from there.
Okay. Sounds
Sound good?
good. Yep.
All right, man. All
Absolutely.
right, we'll see you after the break.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, see ya. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. I couldn't do this without you. To help show support, please hit the like button, subscribe to the show, and leave a comment. Your support and your feedback mean the world to me. Thanks again for listening. Hey, Bruce, welcome back from the break. Hopefully, you got a chance to get some water and things like that, and
Yes, I
uh,
did.
yeah, get a chance to relax for a minute. But before we went on the break, we were talking about your childhood and things, and actually when you came to Christ, and right there at the end, before I guess before we went back to kind of went through up to the time you enlisted, and then kind of went back. But I want to kind of go back to where you enlisted. So you're talking about high school, just on a whim. One day, you're like, I'm going to go see a recruiter. Um, you said your dad was Army. So what
Right.
made you go see an Air Force recruiter?
Yeah, that's interesting. Way that went down, and a good question. So it wasn't in high school. I actually graduated high school and I was working, and the day that I went to see the recruiter, I was up on a roof. We were building a building behind my dad's house, and I was up on the roof, and a buddy of mine was helping me, and we had just decided that three of us went. And the reason that I went to see the Air Force recruiter is because my dad said, "Hey, go Air Force. Like you
Yeah.
get treated better." My dad's brother, one was a Marine and one was Air Force. The Air Force one said, "Hey, go Air Force." The Marine said, "Go Marine." So
Yeah.
there was more saying Air Force than anything else. And when I went to talk to the recruiter and stuff, my ASVAB scores, they weren't great, but they were good enough that I could, kind of get what I wanted to do and stuff. And so
Yeah.
it just made more sense to go into the Air Force, and especially since I was thinking about air traffic control.
Yeah. So what made you think about air traffic control?
I have no idea, man. Like I'm looking at all these possibilities, and I'm thinking about the Air Force, and I'm like, I think I watched a movie and a guy controlling aircraft and stuff. I'm like, that'd be cool. Like,
Yeah.
'cause, like I like being in control of things and like sequencing aircraft in and stuff. I just thought that would be neat. I didn't know anything about combat control,
Yeah.
and so it just got in my head that that's what I wanted to do, and I qualified. My scores were higher enough, but they were pushing combat control really hard back then. And so as soon as I said, the recruiter saw that I was in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
And as soon as I said air traffic control, he's like, "Hey, what about this?" And he had me,
Yeah.
jump out of planes and get to do that as well. Yeah, let's go.
Do it. Yeah. That's and it's funny the way things have obviously with technology, but back in the day, I mean, even when I joined in 2000, um, you didn't really have the internet, and so it
Right.
was you didn't really know what was going on until you showed up. They're like, "Well, we have these jobs," and you're like, "Oh no, okay,"
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
You can't do a lot of research back in 1986.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, unless you were like super rich and you had a whole
Yeah.
house dedicated to a computer.
Yeah.
But okay, so you go to the recruiter. You're like, "Hey, I want to be ATC." He's like, "Hey, we have this combat control thing." You
Right.
say, "All right, let's do it." So then you go to Lackland, right? Because everybody goes to Lackland. I think
Right.
everybody's always gone to Lackland. I don't know if that's ever changed.
No, it's still go to Lackland.
All right, and then from there, you graduate basic training, then you go into the pipeline. Now the pipeline's changed quite a bit
It's
from
changed. It's changed so much over the
yeah.
years.
So the time you went through it, what did that look like? Did you have to do the OLH?
No, I went straight to Keesler after BMT. So I went to Keesler for air traffic control school,
Okay.
and that was kind of we didn't have the water portion of it. We didn't go to dive school until you got to a squadron,
Okay.
and so I went to Keesler, and it was a difficult. It was difficult there at Keesler because the academics for air traffic control school I thought were pretty hard
Yeah.
by themselves, and then you add in the physical requirements there. So it was, when you get home from eating at the dining facility at the chow hall and you're ready to go to sleep and you got to study and stuff. I thought it was a challenging environment.
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, the air traffic curriculum I think alone is pretty
Yeah,
tough.
yeah,
Pretty stressful as well.
yeah.
And then on top of it, having to do, whatever the cadre wanted you to do.
Yeah, I had a buddy who was in my flight, and he was the only other one that was going into combat control. So we kind of hooked up, and he actually made it through and got assigned to the same squadron there at Pope. We were controllers together and stuff, but it was pretty neat to have him and to be able to talk to him. The recruiter said, "Why do you guys want to do this? Why, the life expectancy when you go into combat is really low, and all these negative things. But we
Yeah.
were pretty set on that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. It's nowadays I understand, why people want to go do special tactics or special warfare. Just because it's mainstream everywhere now. But I think, and not, I'm not trying to call you old,
Yeah,
but I'm
no,
saying back then, it was like it wasn't as mainstream. So it was like when you found it, like that's what you want to do. I
right.
would almost guarantee that most everybody who tried, I wouldn't say most everybody, there's still a huge washout rate, but most of the guys that wanted to do it were like because they wanted to do it.
Right. Yeah, there were guys that were, they were excited about grabbing a beret or something in the recognition, and those guys didn't last. But
Right.
when you go through even in high school, or you're playing sports, and that team bonding that you have when you're doing something difficult, that it's really, it sucks, but
Yeah.
you do it together, you build this bond with people. It's just like the bond that you have in combat. And
Yeah.
so that bond is what I kind of fell in love with in combat control and special tactics. That going through that difficult training where all you could do is kind of giggle and laugh about it with your buddy,
Yeah.
and embrace the suck. Is kind of what they say. But that's the kind of thing that because afterwards oh, that wasn't bad, man. I loved every minute of it. But it's really bad when you're in it.
Yes. Yep. No, agree. Looking back on it, you're like, dude, that was pretty fun,
Right.
and then, but then you're thinking about the things you did while you're there. And you're like, man, that was pretty insane. And that sucked while doing it.
Yes. Yes.
Um, okay. So you did Keesler. So you went through ATC at Keesler, which is now moved. I literally just found out a couple weeks ago that it's been
Yeah.
moved to the actual schoolhouse at Pope.
That Pope. Yep.
Which one of my friends is an instructor there, and I'm like, I didn't put two and two together. And he actually, when I texted him, he's like, "Yeah, dude, why do you think they hired me?" I was like, "Oh, it makes sense." So then from there, where did you go?
So I went to jump school right after that, Fort Benning.
Okay.
And unfortunately, my medical records didn't get there in time. So I did usually jump school for the Air Force is 3 weeks. I did the extra phase that the Army gets called zero phase, where you just do details for 12 to 14 hours a day. So I got extra training there at Fort Benning. Then after Fort Benning, that's when we went to the combat control school. We went to survival school too. So you go to survival school, and then you go to the combat control school, and that was really the pipeline. And then once you graduate the combat control school, you would go to a team, and that's when you would be able to go to military free fall and dive school. And back then, dive school was, combat diver, Key West, tough school.
Yeah.
And a lot of the older guys, that's when they made it 100%. Everyone would be dive qualified. So a lot of the older guys didn't want to go to Key West. They wanted to go somewhere else. And so I got to a team, and they said, "Hey, we have a Key West slot. Anyone want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go. I'm ready." And so I got to go to Key West combat diver fairly early,
Nice.
and Halo as well. So it was just being in the right place at the right time and being ready to go, which is always important in what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So out of the pipeline, what would you say was that was the most arduous for you, as well as maybe the most fun?
I think Key West combat diver school in the pipeline. I went to Marine recon later on in my career, like as a staff sergeant, and that's a whole nother experience. It was difficult, but in the pipeline, or right after the pipeline, going to combat diver school, that was a challenge because you can take somebody's food away, you can take their sleep away. You can make life difficult. When you take their air away, that's a whole nother story. Like it changes things when you take someone's air away. So that was I was pretty good in the water, but that was probably the most difficult training that I did early on.
Gotcha.
And the pre-scuba part, just to qualify to go, because they did just when you had a squadron, they just didn't say, "Hey, go on down to Key West. Good luck."
Yeah.
I actually went through a Special Forces pre-scuba. 2 weeks of pre-scuba before I went to dive school, and pre-scuba was tough as well. So it was 2 months of pain.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So was your pre-scuba the same as it was when, like say my era, where it was like super hard? So that way when you got down there, it was just like, okay, this is cake.
Yeah. It was, that was back when we were doing crossovers. Mm-hmm. So basically you have the tanks and the weight belt, and you have one group on one side of the pool and the other group on the other side, and the teams would just prepare to cross over. and you would go. One team would go high, one team would go low, and you would go and you would come up, and you just keep doing that. And I think basically it was a nutrition exercise to kick people out.
Uh-huh.
So you look down at the shallow end and you see how many people are quitting and
Yeah.
leaving, and you're just trying to hang on. They called it magic time, and so I just remember, they'd start talking about magic time at the beginning of the morning, and it would make my stomach hurt. I just didn't like it at all, because
Yeah.
it was always, how far are they going to push it?
Yeah.
Because on the Wednesday of that week, they had moved us from the big pool to the little pool because they had a problem. So they had too many people. So back in the 80s, they could probably get away with stuff they can't get away with today. But they said something along the lines of, "We have way too many students. We're going to do crossovers until we get 15 to quit today."
Oh, geez.
So, and then I think that's what they were doing, because I would come up and I
Yeah.
would count, at the shallow end on how many had already quit.
Yeah.
And it was a survival, mano y mano, just by yourself. You're not worried about your team at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that doesn't sound fun. And I'm pretty sure stuff goes on like that at some schools where it's like, dude, we got too many people.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's got to just be, that's a horrible place to do it.
Yeah.
So, because at some point people break, man, and it's in that school alone, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So
It's tough.
so you graduate combat control school, and then you go to your first team, or your squadron. What was your first squadron?
I went to Pope. I went to the 1721st Combat Control School, or Combat Control Squadron. Back then, we weren't special tactics yet, so I just went, stayed right there on the base,
Yep.
and I loved it. Great training area, R5311, all the ranges, and so that was a good place for me to be, and close to home as well. It's 3 hours from Fayetteville to Charlotte, so it worked out.
Yeah, perfect. So how long did you stay at Pope for? At the 2-1, which is now the 2-1.
Yeah. So if you look at my 30-year career, a lot of my time was at Pope, but it was at different units. That first time, I think it was probably a couple years, because I ended up going to the Philippines, and I got an assignment there, and I was excited about that. I was a single guy. I went to the Philippines, which is a bad place to be for a single guy, and that's a whole nother story. Especially a single guy that's a Christian that's trying to, be right by the Lord. It's
right. Yeah.
And so I got, I was there, and Mount Pinatubo happened. Mount Pinatubo blew, the volcano, and a lot of people evacuated the base, and I got to stay behind as mission essential and help out with the evacuation and stuff. And then came back to Pope, and spent a little more time on the team, and then ended up going up to the combat control school as an instructor, and then to the 2-4 after that.
Gotcha. So what was it like? So I was never a schoolhouse instructor, and I kind of always wanted to be, because it looked fun from that side. So what was that like as an instructor, seeing, I guess, behind the curtain on how, like, being smoked all the time during combat control school, and then now you're the instructor. So without pulling, I guess, the curtain too wide open, what was that like?
Well, I can just talk to the schoolhouses that I've been at, and the thing that great leadership and great teammates that want to give the students everything that they need to be successful as they go on in their career. And so we had some great leaders there, that anything that we did, if we were going to say, hey, we want the students to swim across this lake and assault this building, and whatever, we had a policy that we would do it. The instructors would do it prior to that, to make sure that it was safe.
Yeah.
And we didn't we weren't just dropping students without getting down and doing that, doing the PT with them and stuff. So I like that environment, because it wasn't, do as I say. It was watch me, do as I do. And it was a great time for me. I was still single at that time, and enjoying life and enjoying that environment, staying in great shape, and feeling like I was making a difference in the career field.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's always good when you're being told to do something that's it's not going to be fun.
Yeah.
But seeing the guy telling you to do it
Yeah.
himself.
Right.
It's just like, okay, well, he did it, I guess I got to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Lead
so
by example.
yeah, exactly right. That's man, that's something that I lived by through the military. If I'm telling my dudes go TDY, I'm going to go TDY as what TDY with them.
Right, right.
Um, and there are a lot of people who didn't see it that way. And it's like, well, I'm the team sergeant. I'm gonna stick around. I'm like, well, no, your guys are going. You need to do it.
Yeah.
Show them that you are. Yes, you are the team sergeant, and like you are the team leader. You know,
Hmm.
go with
Right.
them. So, yeah, that's awesome. So uh, uh, between I guess the first time you were at Pope to the Philippines, and then before you became an instructor, anything any good stories? Anything pop off between now or those two time
Yeah,
frames, or
I was in
anything
the
stand
I
out?
was in the right place a lot of times for humanitarian missions. So in the Philippines, we had the earthquake that happened, and so I helped out with that. And then Mount Pinatubo, so humanitarian mission there. Got to see that side of things. And then when I got back to Pope, when I don't know if you remember Hurricane Hugo.
Hmm.
It was, yeah. So it came through and it destroyed St. Croix, and we took a team to St. Croix. Thought we were going to have to jump in to run that airfield, for a couple of weeks for them because it was totally devastated. But we ended up being able to land. But we worked a couple of weeks there, living in condos that had been evacuated, no electricity, but running the airfield, doing humanitarian stuff. So I just felt like that was so gratifying to be able to go and help people.
Yeah.
And there's also the ugly side of seeing some of the things that happen to people and the devastation and stuff, and life's destroyed. And so I got the opportunity to do that in the tsunami relief there in Indonesia as well in 2004, in which we went to Banda Aceh, which was 100,000 people killed right there.
Yeah.
So they had earth movers just covering bodies up and stuff. It was a terrible scene, and
Yeah.
we worked some long hours, and our heart was broken for all those people. But you realize that you're making a difference, so
Yeah.
gratifying.
Yeah. When you mentioned Hugo, I think we had left Charleston. We went to Rhine Main. We had moved over to Germany when Hugo came through, and then came back to Charleston maybe after. I don't remember.
Yeah,
But I know that we had left.
yeah,
We happened to be gone for that.
yeah.
Um,
It hit Fayetteville and Charlotte and stuff. So it hit St. Croix. We got on a plane to go to St. Croix to provide humanitarian aid there, and then it hit our homes.
yeah.
But it all worked out. We were able to do some good work there.
Yeah, I would say, what would so all right, let me back up. So in basic training, did the combat control instructors or anybody come by and like show you guys videos and talk about
Yeah,
uh, guys like that?
yeah. They had a guy that came by. I want to say he was a SEER guy, but he talked about special career fields, and he talked a
Mm.
little bit about combat control, and he asked, "Is anybody going into this?" And I think they had general open back then, so you could actually volunteer to go into it. They didn't have many takers. Can't even remember who the guy was, and I didn't think that it was that inspiring of a speech or anything.
Yeah.
Um, I think they do a much better job with that now.
Yeah. Okay. So not knowing too much about it other than doing ATC what you wanted to do and then jumping
Yeah,
out of airplanes and getting kind of a so speech from
yeah.
a SEER instructor. Once you were on the teams and you'd been established on the team and stuff, was it kind of meeting your expectations of what you thought it was going to be, or was what was that like?
100% meeting my expectations. So, my mom used to say, if there was, when I was young, if there was something, like if somebody dared me to do something, she knew
Yeah,
that I was going to go do it. Jump off this cliff into this water. You don't know how deep it is, but go ahead and do it. I dare you. And I would do it.
yeah,
So my expectations were, let's go. Let's be physically strong, mentally strong, and let's do some really hard things.
yeah,
And that's what it was about. And back then, before 9/11, the people that were in before 9/11, it was completely different. And
right,
9/11 happened, and it was a whole different military world. But back then, we did some really neat training trips, and the camaraderie on the team was really tight. And I loved it. I absolutely ate it up. and that's why I kept re-enlisting every time it came up.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, you did 30 years, right? And you did mention you're like, well, I don't know if I was going to make this a career. And I
Yeah,
find that funny because I think a lot of people who go to retire and spend over 20 years initially enlist and be like to themselves, like, I'm going to do my 4, I'm going to get out, I'm going to come
yeah,
home, and and it's like then they spend their life in
yeah,
the military. So that's pretty cool, and to think about that. And now that the job is meeting or exceeding your expectations, that's pretty awesome. Um, all right, so you're at the 2/17/21st. Then you go to the
come back to middle
Philippines.
school. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I go to the Philippines and then come
yep,
back to 1721st.
yep. And then now you're at the combat control school. And then you said you went after that. Where'd you go?
I went up to the 2-4. I went to selection for the 2-4 STS,
Okay.
and I was at the schoolhouse. We were developing a survey program for the career field. It was like a 7-level survey program, so I was heavily involved in that.
Yep.
So the superintendent at the time let me go up to selection for the 2-4. So I did that, but and I got picked up. But I also, part of the deal was I would stay behind for a year and
Yep.
start the next training course there for the 2-4 the next year, so I could finish up my time doing the survey, stand up and stuff. So it worked out. I got picked up, and then the next year after that, I went back up and went through the whole selection thing again,
Yeah.
just because I guess they felt like I needed to go through it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I went up to the 2-4 after that. That
Nice.
was in like '97, I think.
97.
Yeah.
So the survey course you're doing that at the combat control school, was that to be now, were you just writing stuff for the career field, or were you
Yeah.
just doing that?
We're writing lesson plans for the career field. We that was one of our core missions, to be able to go out and do a survey on an airfield, and get it signed off so aircraft can all aircraft, DoD aircraft, can land at. And so we didn't really have a formal course, so we were developing the curriculum and writing the formal course.
Gotcha. Now, did that stick? Did that become a
Yeah.
course?
They stopped teaching it at Combat Control School, and they were teaching it down here at the Mads Combat AFSOC. But yeah, it's still out there. It's still important to the mission.
Oh, cool. Yeah, man. That's pretty awesome. Have you seen it lately? Is that something that that you wrote that's still in there, or
Um,
have things changed?
no, I mean, I was a jump master. I led the jump master program at the Combat Control School, the static on jump master program, for many years. So
Yeah.
guys will still tell me that they'll like see a picture of me or something, but I probably think all that stuff's gone now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have fond memories of doing that and running the courses and stuff.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, so you're there. You go to selection for the
Yeah,
2/4, and then get picked up. Go back to the schoolhouse to finish out your year and writing this
right.
curriculum. And then you go back and you still have to go back through selection again.
Yeah, so they did selection. The 2-4 is one of our, it's our elite unit that we have another selection process to get to.
Yeah.
So you have the selection process in the pipeline, and then you go to your unit, and then you go up to the 2-4, and it's another selection process. Back then, it was like a little 2-week selection that you would do. And if you got picked up, then you would come up there. Well, when I went back up the next time, they had changed the process from the way they did it before, and it was all, you would go up there and you would be assigned there. You'd go through the selection process at the beginning, and then you would start an operator training course that was 8 to 10 months.
Yeah.
And so I went through that selection process again, even though I had made it already. And but it was good. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, because you don't want to be, well, I'm going to sit this one out while the team that I'm going to be with for the next 8 to 10 months goes through this training. I wouldn't want that to happen. So they did it the
Yeah.
right way.
Good. Yeah. Man, so what was that? Was that pretty tough?
Yeah, it was
Doing
tough.
that selection?
It
Yeah.
was tough, because they just expect you. A lot of guys are afraid to try out because they feel like they're going to fail, and be embarrassed by it. But it's set up to where you're going to fail at something.
Yeah.
You're not going to just sail through, and so they purposely put you in a situation where you're going to fail at something and see how you respond and react to it. So once you get that in your mind, like, this is all about how I respond to failure and how I jump back into it and accomplish the task. And so that's what we did, and
Yeah.
it was very tough, but again, I go back to my teammates, the guys I went through the training pipeline. They're some of my best friends, and the guys I went through the selection process, same thing. I could call them up today and talk to them, and the guys would help me out, and I would help them out.
Yeah. I think that's what I miss most about kind of being out of the team environment.
Hmm.
Is that camaraderie, like you said.
Yeah,
I've got
yeah,
guys that I went through the pipeline with, guys I've been on team with, guys I've been overseas with, that I still like. I have probably on one hand, those guys I can call,
yeah,
who will pick up the phone and we can chat about anything. And
absolutely.
so, I've gained some great friends inside of that world.
Yeah.
Like you said, you have,
Hmm.
and it's good, because you guys go to the suck together, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Uh, and so, but I think that's one of the bigger things that I miss
Yeah.
about doing that. But all right, so hey, I need let's take another quick break,
Okay.
and then when we get back, we'll pick up from once you got through selection the second time, because we're talking like 1997.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on. I know there's some things happening over in Europe, and then 9/11 happened.
Right.
And so we'll get into that, and then maybe chat a little bit about your jumps, your combat jumps, what that was like, stuff like
Hmm.
that, and then we'll continue on from there.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, brother. Well, we'll see you in a couple minutes.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. All right, Bruce. Welcome back from the break. Um, all right. So we left off. You went through your second selection up there, the 2-4. And then it was 1997 going on 98. We had things about to pop off. And one of the things I talked about in the opening was that you have 3 combat jumps, one of which was the first in Afghanistan. And I kind of want to talk about that. Initially, at least that first one in Afghanistan.
Right.
And I would assume that would be your first combat jump as well.
Yes, it was.
So talk me through that, man. What was that like, dude? Like mentally, like
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, you and I talked about it a little bit offline, but the combat jump is something that we all want to do.
yeah,
If you're in combat control, TAC P, any of these soft units, it doesn't matter what the service is.
yeah.
Everyone wants to get that opportunity to do a combat jump. It's pretty neat. And so at the time, I had right before 9/11, I had taken over one of the teams,
Hmm.
and I took over a team that was really involved with the Ranger battalions and doing airfield seizures and stuff. And so I was doing that a lot as a team leader. I learned from some greats, and so it was the first combat jump was an airfield seizure, into Objective Rhino,
Yeah,
and it was neat because we had done an exercise a couple months before that, kind of the same scenario and stuff. And so I was in Hungary when 9/11 happened. I was on a mission. We were doing a training mission out there when I found out about it, and then everything changed for us. I remember a good friend of mine, PJ Tony Negron. We were over there together, and when we were watching the news and everything that was happening, he was writing in his little notebook. And I remember he wrote, "Life as we know it, our military life as we know it, has changed forever," or something like that.
yeah,
Just thinking of, and it was really amazing vision. We knew that things were going to be different, and they were. Like if you came in before 9/11,
yeah.
um, you have an understanding of fighting for funds and fighting for training, and then after 9/11, it was all about getting after the enemy that did that to us on that
Yeah.
terrible day. And so we came back and we started planning for the mission. It was very difficult for my family because we weren't talking about anything that was going on. Everything was close hold. We were looking at where we could get into the country, and do some missions and stuff. And we had some guys that were obviously, going with teams and going in, but the real big, mass force, first ones to go in was the Objective Rhino mission with the Rangers,
Yeah.
run 200 Rangers, and I think it was about 16 or 17 special tactics members. I was the team leader for that. I just remember being able to address the team prior to that night, prior to the mission,
Yeah.
and just full of pride, and an understanding of what we had to do. But going in with confidence and knowing that every single person on that team was ready to do the mission. Like things can happen, but
Hmm.
we're ready to do the mission. And I don't want to say that, we were looking for revenge,
Yeah.
but we were looking to set it straight that we're not going to tolerate what you did, and this was for us. That was the kickoff for all the guys that jumped in on Rhino. It was a
Yeah.
pretty neat mission. It went down. We had a few things happen, but I remember the 4 hour. It was a 4 hour plane ride going in, and
Long ride.
yeah, long ride. And so I I had written a letter. That letter that you write to your family, in case something happens. And
Yeah.
so I'd done that. I sat down and I wrote a letter to my family. And I remember, I wish I still had the letter. I don't know what I did with it. They probably never gave it back to me, but it basically said, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was reassuring, hopefully, to them if I was to get killed in action, because it said, I'll be in heaven.
Yeah.
I'm right with the Lord, and so to live is Christ, to die is gain, like Paul said. And so if something happens to me, I died doing what I was supposed to be doing, and I want you to know that, and I don't want you to worry about me. I wrote that letter. It's very difficult, very emotional, but on the plane ride, it was amazing. God gave me this sense of just peace.
Yeah.
We're packed in this C-130 with as many Rangers as you can pack into a C-130.
Seats
Illegally,
out?
probably illegally.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were crammed in, and I remember just being at peace with the whole thing. Going over the mission that we were going to do on the ground, because I was a team leader and I had to make things happen right away. Going over the mission in my head, also, thanking God that He put me in that situation where I could be there, and thanking God for the teammates that we had going in on that. But also being very uncomfortable with all the people just stacked on top of each other. The Rangers were all over me. We were just uncomfortable. But I remember thinking about the people in the rubble of 9/11, and the people that survived, but they were waiting to be dug out. And
Yeah.
so it was all like a super focus on what we needed to do and why we needed to do it.
Man, that's awesome. What was the feeling when the doors opened?
I was so ready to get out of that plane.
Yeah. I can bet.
I was ready to get out of that plane, and the fresh air. Because believe it or not, like a lot of people don't know this, but apparently back then, you might know, but apparently back then you could, like the loadmasters can smoke
Yeah.
on the plane going into combat. And
Yeah.
so we had a loadmaster up there that was up on the ramp, and he was smoking. I couldn't believe it. Like, I'd never seen that before, and to this day I haven't seen it again. But just the air didn't feel good to me,
Yeah.
and I was ready when that door opened up and all the fresh air came in. I was ready to get out of that plane.
Yeah, I can bet.
Like, let's get after the enemy.
I mean, when you load a C-130, just is it 98? I don't know, 85, something like that.
It depends on, as
combat
far as how many
loaded
you
or
can
not.
get on there. It just depends on, because we didn't have any seats. Everybody's sitting in the floor.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
can get the max amount on there, and I can't remember what it was, but it was the max amount and probably over that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, open your legs up. The guy sits, in between your legs, a
Yep.
Ranger with a big Carl Gustav and all kinds of, and you're just miserable. And I had a good buddy of mine behind me. Greg Pittman was behind me, and he's like, man, you squirmed the entire 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll never
Man.
forget that. I'll never forget the peace that God gave me on that flight. It was like this comforting feeling. No matter what happened, I wasn't afraid, because I knew, that I have salvation, and
Yeah.
I'm doing what I was trained to do. And so it was very surreal.
Yeah. I can imagine. Still having that faith in the Lord, and and knowing that He's going to take care of you no matter what happens.
Right.
That's got to be a good feeling. Well, I mean, I know it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
But just kind of in that moment of like just intensity.
Yeah.
Knowing that what's not knowing what's ahead of you.
Right.
Knowing and not knowing. Yeah, man, that's pretty awesome. So, you get out under canopy, boot to the ground. You're like, here we go.
Yeah. It was 200 Rangers running around an airfield, and we're trying to survey an airfield, and so it was kind of chaotic. I'm talking to guys over the radio, and the guys know what they're supposed to be doing. Like I said, we were trained. I was proud of the team. They were ready to go. So it was the first time in history since the failed attempt, in the Iran rescue mission, that we successfully went in nighttime and set up an airfield, surveyed an airfield, set up an airfield, and landed aircraft. There was no survey or nothing that we sent back and said, "Hey, approve this." It was basically our call over the radio, me as a team leader saying, "Hey, we're ready for you guys to land aircraft here." It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. That's pretty awesome. Like
Yeah. And
doing the
then and
first.
then you're in Afghanistan in the middle of nowhere, and seeing these C-130s come in, that um, are there to refuel helicopters that are going to go do an important mission as
Yeah,
part of another mission and stuff. It's really neat to be a part of that.
yeah, I can imagine, man. That's awesome. And just hearing you talk about it, dude. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
it,
it's
it was it was gratifying for sure.
awesome. So you had two more jumps in Afghanistan.
Right.
Um, did they compare to that, or like were
Well,
you like, dude?
that first one was the mass tactical, 200
Yeah,
meters and stuff, and it was very important because we had, not to get into all of the details about it, but we had different missions going on for that night. So we were basically setting up a staging base to
yeah,
refuel helicopters to go do some really important things that needed to happen in the beginning of the war. So that was a lot of planning. After that, we were the only show in town. Like
yeah.
combat controllers, getting folks in the middle of Afghanistan to go do direct action missions. It didn't matter whether you were a SEAL or special forces or whatever. We were getting people in there because we were jumping in and setting up these airfields, and then these teams would come in and land. Aircraft would land in the middle of darkness, no lights,
Yeah.
and SEAL teams would shoot out of the back of the 130, and go do a direct action mission and get picked up later. And so it was pretty neat, but it was fast. It was going fast. And so I did a Halo mission after that, and I did another static line mission. The Halo mission was pretty wild because we did that with the SEAL team, and I was telling you earlier offline, it was a triple task aircraft. So they had the mission that they were dropping some bundles or leaflets or something,
Mhm.
and then we were the next to go with my SEAL team. And then right after that, we had a guy, Mike Bain, who exited the aircraft with a big, huge bundle.
Yeah.
Pretty scary jump that he did, but I was glad Mike was on that plane because he helped us get ready. And when we exited the aircraft, we weren't like, it wasn't a very high halo, but we were high enough that you got a little bit of free fall time, and then you opened up and you could see the outline of the dry lake bed. So we
Yeah.
knew where we were supposed to go. But then after you got to a certain elevation, it was just complete abyss, no illumination at all. You couldn't see anything. And thankfully, we had put the chem lights on our backs and on our front. We debated whether we would do that, but we decided to do it.
Yeah.
And so I could see, I was one of the last ones to leave the aircraft, so I could see the guys coming in and landing. So I had an idea of where they were at.
Yeah.
Sorry, dogs are barking.
No, you're good.
But I had an idea of where they were at, so I could land, and I landed standing up. I think I may have fell down just because I felt like I needed to. But we had a SEAL who went in, probably one of the first ones to go in, and he hit so hard he degloved his kneecaps. Both of his kneecaps just came off. He was done.
Yeah.
And they didn't have knee pads on, but it wouldn't have mattered if he'd had knee pads. I mean, he hit so hard.
Yeah.
But he sat there the whole night until we could get him out of there. But yeah, that was a pretty wild mission because it's just this huge dry lake bed, and you're like, there's no established runway that you can go and, okay, I'll set the lights up on the edge of the runway. You're out in the middle of this big dark blob of sand and dirt,
right?
And we're gonna start here. We're gonna set up, and we're gonna set our lights out, our blackout lights, and we're gonna run this airfield and bring in a direct action team, and it's the coolest thing ever. In the middle of nowhere, and blacked out, you hear the C-130 coming in and landing, and you see the SEAL team coming out the back and going to do a mission. You're like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that 9 out of 10 of us have we've trained to do that,
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. Wow. That's good stories. I like it.
Yeah, it was
Um,
some good times.
Definitely memorable.
Yeah.
Um, so after all that, so 97 you got into the team up there. Um, so we're talking 2001. So during that time and after, and I know we spoke about this earlier, but we talked about being a man of faith and how you kind of fit that into how did you fit that into being in the teams? Because I know firsthand there's some dudes that are just like you know
Yeah.
yeah,
I did a poor job with it, to be honest with you. I was like saved at 13, but man, you couldn't tell it. And some guys knew, but I
yeah,
didn't live my life like I should have been living my life. I wasn't a good example, especially when we were in the thick of combat.
yeah,
Um, my main focus was being able to survive and my teammates survive in combat, and my family and everything else took a back seat to that.
yeah,
And it was a really rough time. And then after that first deployment, the second deployment, where we'd lost we lost Chappie, who was on my teammate. John Chapman was on my team. I was his team sergeant when he was killed in action,
yeah,
and I went over 2 weeks after he was killed in action. And so um, it was a difficult time for all of us, because that we were consumed with going over and doing the mission, coming back, and then still being tied into what was going on, because you're worried about your teammates, and you want to stay in the fight, and then going back over, and everybody's family and your marriage and everything took a back seat.
yeah,
I didn't handle that well at all. I didn't look like a Christian,
yeah,
but I sometimes feel like I was just in survival mode to get through what I was doing. I became callous to feelings. I turned everything off except combat.
yeah.
And we're not supposed to be like that as humans, but that's what I ended up having to do to survive.
Yeah, and I know we were talking offline when it came to that. Just turning things off. During that time, it was all about you come swing back into town, you come home for a little bit, but
Yeah,
then your mind's always what are my guys doing, or what do I got to do next?
right.
We have another team over there; those guys are right. Stuff's happening, and you know it was really hard. I think
Yeah,
to kind of turn that off and become that the husband and the dad
yeah.
again. And I know a lot of times I got put by the wayside. How were some? Did you find do you have any tricks or any things like that? Any, not tricks, but like and it didn't have to be like right then, but
I had some moments. I had
yeah,
some moments where I got some clarity of how I was really messing up,
yeah,
and how I needed to change my life, and focus on my family more. And one of them, my relationship with I mean, we were hanging on by a thread. The only reason we were staying together was because of the kids. It was
right,
really bad. And she was doing everything and taking care of everything, and I was focused on my stuff. I
yeah,
remember coming home. I was came home, and I was getting ready to go to Afghanistan again, and one of my boys, uh, my wife said, "Hey, can you help me out with something?" And I'm like, thinking about what I had to do the next day, and so I was kind of grumpy with her. And she's just like, "Well, can you at least go put Sam to bed?" I think it was Sam, but anyway, go put him to bed. And so I
yeah,
said, "Sure, yeah, why not?" And I go up there. It was Sam. So I go up there, and he's got this toy. It's his favorite toy. You remember when you were a kid, and you have your toy when you're a kid. You remember it, like everyone has that favorite toy, right? Well, this was his favorite toy, a little transformer toy.
yeah,
He's playing with it, and I'm like thinking about what I have to do. I'm like, Sam, you got to go to bed. I'm laying down with him, but you got to go to sleep, and I'm getting upset with him. And then I tell him, like, put the toy down, and he keeps doing it, right? So I take his toy
yeah,
and I throw it against the wall, and it breaks into pieces.
yeah,
And and the look on his face, like the terror on his face, I would never hurt my family,
yeah,
but the look on his face was like, who are you? Like, you're not even my dad.
yeah,
And so it was a man, a really gut punch.
yeah,
And I took that toy, I put it in a little plastic bag, I kept it in the console of my Jeep. I looked at it all the time to remember that particular moment. I bought him 5 toys that next day, just like that. And I
yeah,
sat down with him and I talked to him about, dad was bad. Dad let things that are happening at work and things that are happening with his teammates affect my relationship with you, and that can't happen. And so things like that, where I learned, And you at some point you don't have to do everything. You gotta focus on the family. So there's some things that the military will ask you to do, and you absolutely have to do it. But
Right.
when you have an opportunity to invest in the family, or invest in the team, or invest in something with the military, and you get to choose, pick your family.
Yeah.
Pick your
No, I
family
agree.
always.
Agree.
And I didn't always make that choice.
Hmm.
One of the last things before I got out, my middle son was playing his last high school football game, and there was this important event that I was supposed to go to as a command chief, and everyone was like, "You got to be there. Like you're supposed to be there." My commander supported me 100%. I'm like, "I'm not going," and
Yeah.
it was a big deal, and and so my son walked up to the very. I was there for his last Friday night football game. He walked up to the very edge of the field, and I got to embrace him as he stepped off the field. And it was emotional for him, and it was emotional for me.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I almost didn't go because I almost chose the military. And that was toward the end of my career, and I was starting to get things right then with my family. Uh,
Yeah.
but choose the family if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's man, that's an emotional story.
Yeah,
Because I think most of us who've done our jobs have kind of been there. There's
yeah,
those moments where you just like, you know, you with a toy, and
yeah,
your son just looking at you like, who the heck are you? And you're like,
yeah,
who am I?
yeah,
And like, who have I become? And it's a tough to it's I think it's really hard for us, and I think it's hard for us once we retire to get out of that situation too, to turn stuff off, because it's like, you're having to do that all the time, and you just
hmm
it gets really exhausting. It's tough, but I mean, it's good for the family,
yeah.
because you want to be there for them. They didn't ask for this. you
Yeah,
know
they didn't sign up for this.
yeah.
But you, as an operator, you write checks that you can't cash. Like you don't have the funds to cash them. Cash them.
Yeah.
And later on, they come due, and that happens to every operator that's been in combat. No matter they might say, "Hey, I'm okay," but everybody's affected. If you've seen combat and you've been in situations, you've lost teammates, you've changed, you're different. It's impossible to not be different. And if you've suppressed everything while you've been deployed, and you become callous to feelings, and
Yeah.
that's one of the problems that I had once I got out is I didn't have any emotions. Like I had no feelings at all because for so long I suppressed everything down, so I didn't feel pain,
Hmm.
and so I couldn't feel pain. My body, my mind would just automatically take over, and someone I cared about would pass away or something, and my mind wouldn't let me feel it,
Yeah.
and it was terrible. It was rough right when I got out, because the responsibility of I'm not a command chief anymore. I'm not that guy where everybody's going to look to me and I have to have everything together. And
Yeah.
all those emotions that I had compressed down into a little box and just like kept them in there, they started coming out and I couldn't control. And mostly came out in anger and sleepless nights and all that stuff. But yeah, I had to get some help. It was pretty difficult.
Yeah. And that in itself right there is pretty tough. Just making that leap to go talk to somebody,
Yeah,
because I think a lot of times that just I wouldn't say just in our career fields,
yeah,
inside the teams or anything, but I think just in general, like it's hard for a man to go like, I need help.
yeah,
I need to go talk to somebody.
yeah,
um I think more so just because I know, I've been there,
yeah,
and I've been in the environment. I think more so within the teams, because a lot of times it's you kind of have that like, I need to fix this on my own.
yeah,
I don't need your help. I might
yeah,
need your help, but I don't want your help because I need to do it on my. I need
yeah,
to show you I can do it. And I think a lot of us now are starting to see that like it's okay.
yeah,
And I think I can't remember the chief of staff, um, that finally came out and was like, okay, all right, if you have jump, dive, demo, um, free fall, whatever certifications you have, you can keep them. Go
yeah,
get fixed,
yeah,
whether that's physical, mental, or whatever. Because
yeah,
that's a lot of times guys wouldn't go because it's like, dude, I don't want to go to Nick. I don't want to go
yeah,
to Neff.
yeah,
Because I need to get this jump so I can get my 350 or
yeah. 150.
I
Yeah,
can't
right,
remember.
depending on what jump. Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And we're doing better with that, but there's still a problem with it. Guys don't want to go. Guys don't want to identify that they've got an issue until after they've retired.
Yeah.
And you got to talk about it right away.
You do. That's a big thing. Like one of the things, it's frustrating, and we're getting on kind of off topic,
Yeah,
but you know, hearing and I'll say this, like the 22 push-ups a day, man. I'm like, don't, I no, like
yeah,
you doing 22 push-ups isn't going to stop me from coming down into my office
yeah,
or driving my car out into the
yeah,
middle of nowhere.
yeah,
But what will is like is actual, I guess, good, not training, if you will, but just knowledge, knowing that, hey, there are people out there, like you're not going to get chastised for coming to talk to somebody,
yeah,
um, so it's like if there's actual, and there are now, um, good, not units, but companies or nonprofits that go out there and
yeah,
kind of help with that, you
yeah.
know, and
It
I'm
is.
glad to see guys going out getting that bonding time with other dudes and talking
Yeah,
about things that are bothering them, because I know I went through a period where um it was just like, I know my wife was like, dude, you're angry. I'm like, I know, but I like it, because
yeah,
it was a feeling, and it nothing was helping. But when I started talking to somebody,
yeah,
it started going, somebody who'd been there,
yeah, yeah,
it started going away, and I was like, there's something to this,
yeah.
because you do bottle it up, but
The power of a teammate or somebody who's been through the same scenario, same situations, dealt with the same thing, and they're further along. They're on the
yeah,
other end of it. They came out of it. That's the best we can do, I think. I mean, obviously, you give everything. People say, just give it to the Lord. Well, that's great. I want to give it to the Lord, um, and you absolutely have to. But the
yeah,
Lord puts people in your life, like He did for me, a few times to help me get through some really difficult times, and it was perfect timing that the Lord put somebody. One of the stories was, if we got time, I'll tell you about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's about 5 minutes.
Okay, so it was. So I was dealing with a lot of guilt from the death of one of my teammates. I was talking on the radio with Scott Sather when he was killed in action, and
Gotcha.
I felt responsible for not doing enough to keep him alive.
Yeah.
And so his roommate Mike Atkins, who was a rough PJ, I knew him very well, and but just not. I didn't think him as a Christian at all. And he calls me up one day and he's like, "Hey, I'm in town, man. Can I swing by and see you?" And it was a Wednesday night, and I'm like, "Well, uh, I can't, man, because I'm leading the kids youth program. We don't have a youth pastor right now, so I'm kind of leading that up, and I got to be with the kids." He's like, "Hey, can I come to church with you?" And
Yeah.
this was all over text, and I was like, I paused for. He made fun of me because I paused for a second. I didn't answer him right away because I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out, like, Mike Atkins in this environment. I don't see it, because a big Harley, Davidson, rough guy, right?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. God did amazing things that night because he showed up. He got in there. He talked to all the youth, and he saved. He found the Lord and living his life for Christ on a mission. Played the guitar with the kids, and then we went to eat after that. And God put him back in my life for a reason. He was Scott Sather's teammate, or
Yeah.
Scott Sather's roommate. And so we had a long conversation. I talked about some of the guilt I had that I hadn't talked to anybody about, and he thought about it and he said some really neat things. But then he wrote me a letter after that was very meaningful and helped me a lot. And it's just a teammate coming back into my life.
Yeah.
God put him there with the perfect scenario to help me get through that.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's a great story.
yeah,
And that's and the way the Lord works is amazing.
yeah,
Just he the way he does things.
yeah,
I almost thought you were going somewhere with there's that story where the person is stranded and it's like a boat. He's praying and
yeah, yeah.
and
Oh,
then
yeah, yeah. And God sends people, and He
yeah.
turning them away.
Yeah, and then when he dies, he's like, "Well, why didn't you see me?" He's like, "Well, I sent you a car,
That's
a
right.
boat, and a
That's right.
helicopter, or whatever.
That's right.
Use whatever modes of transportation." But yeah, it's true. So, thank God for people like that, and thank God for him.
Yeah,
Um,
and a
you know,
few
be-
other guys too. And I try to do that for guys now. Have that relationship where I can talk to guys if they're going through difficult times. You can see it in their eyes. If you've been around it enough, you can see the pain in their eyes. And so I try to talk to them about it if they'll open up.
Yeah. That's good, man. We need people like that. People who who've been through something,
Yeah.
been through the depression, not
Yeah.
necessarily been suicidal, but been through the depression, been through,
Yeah.
the hard times and stuff like that, and just having somebody to lean on. That's a big thing. Is just having I always talk about I always made this analogy with what I was saying earlier is like I can talk to my wife about it.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, out of everybody, she wanted to know, when I was going out on a mission,
Yeah.
and things that were happening, all this stuff. And so I can talk to her about stuff, but it just doesn't, and I love her for it.
Yeah.
But I use the analogy of when I'm talking to her, let's just say she's talking to me about childbirth, right? I've been there for it, right? I've
But you
seen
can't.
it,
Yeah.
but I can't relate on the same level because I never went through that trauma
That's right. Yeah.
that her and another mother could
Yeah.
relate, and so I
Yeah.
kind of look at it that way as like another brother who's been there and done that, could
Right.
relate on that same level, and who's passed through it, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's always good to have teammates and people that you can fall back on, especially a Christian one.
Yeah.
That makes it even better. So well, perfect. Hey, let's take a quick break, and
Okay.
then we'll get back. Kind of want to pull on the thread of the talk that we're having right now, and
Yeah.
that kind of actually leads into kind of later on when you came down to my church after I was already gone, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and then kind of what you're doing these days, and
Right.
talk about that stuff. So yeah, let's take a quick break and then come
Yeah.
back and we'll finish her off.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, man. See you.
Yeah.
Okay, Bruce. All right. Well, we're back and from the break, and we left off pretty much talking kind of somber
Yeah.
in a little way, but stuff I think that needs to be said. But I kind of want to pull in the thread of the of being a Christian and and being in your walk and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I know we've talked prior to this and even in between being on camera, stuff that helps you along the way. And you were telling me about journaling.
Yeah.
So what's that all about?
So when I was going through right after I got out and I was struggling and I had a lot of anger coming out and a lot of sleeping problems and taking things out on my family and also living in habitual sin at that point of my life, which we can talk about later if you want to. But
Yeah.
anyway, when I went to get some counseling, it wasn't Christian counseling and it wasn't military counseling. I went to a therapist to kind of help out. And I had to do something because I was going down a road of destruction.
Yeah.
And so that the therapist said, "Hey, I want you to start journaling, writing stuff down that, so we can talk about it." And I thought it was kind of ridiculous. I tried to journal before and it didn't work for me, but I did start journaling and I was also getting back into reading God's word and trying to get close to the Lord and stuff. And it was a very important time for me. That first book, if I go back to it, I must have like 8 books now that I've journaled through. And the beginning book, if you look at it, you see some pretty dark stuff because I tried to be real on what I was thinking and what was going on and the anger that was coming out. Um, but it was helpful. I mean, just being able to write that down and talk about it, even though she wasn't. I think she was a Christian. We never really talked about it,
Yeah.
but it was helpful to write those things down. And she had me do some things that I thought was a waste of time, but actually ended up being really good. But that started me on during my quiet time. I had made this agreement. I promised God, I'm like, God, I have never read through the Bible completely
Mhm.
and I want to. Can you help me with that? And so I started this chronological reading of the Bible on my own, and and there were days that I didn't feel like doing it, and I didn't feel like I was getting anything out of it, but I kept praying about it. And then there were days when it was just like the words were jumping off the page at me, and it had such meaning. And
Yeah.
I finished the Bible on my birthday, December 30th. I remember, I read through the whole thing, and I was pretty proud of that. But I said, God, like what now? Like, what am I doing now? What do you have me do? And it was, I didn't hear words say, get into my word, like now study my word and use it, but
Yeah.
basically that's what I got out of it. He's like, okay, now you've read through it. Now I
Yeah.
want you to go back and start studying it. And that's what I did. And so a lot of things that I post on social media, some drawings that I do, or just just quotes or scripture or whatever messages. The things that I use when I do my, if I go and speak at a men's group or something, those things, I don't have a plan like, hey, next week I'm going to talk about this and draw this. It's really most of them, 80% of them probably, or I sit down to do my quiet time with the Lord and I'm reading a certain part of scripture and I think about something, or I hear a song, and it reminds me of something, and then I start, drawing a picture, or I start writing, and I don't post probably. I probably maybe haven't posted a lot of stuff lately. I'm still doing it, but I haven't posted. But probably post maybe half of the stuff that I actually write.
Yeah.
One of these days, my boys make fun of me. Like one of these days, I guess it'll be a good book for one of them to put together or something.
Yeah.
And I actually have created a calendar for one of my boys, and I got to do it for the other two boys. Which basically, I take my drawings and stuff, and I made this calendar
That's
that
pretty
has
cool.
scripture in it, and it has my drawings in there, and then it has the days of the week and for scheduling and stuff. And so it's kind of for them. I got that from a good friend of mine who was talking about when he got his mom's Bible. They His mom had written messages in the Bible next to like prayers and stuff, and specifically to her boys.
Yeah.
And so, like anything I can leave behind, these journals, and the these calendar books I make or whatever, if I can leave it behind for my kids, and it has meaning for them, like that's I'm all about it.
Yeah, I like that. That's wish I would have done that earlier. Started journaling and writing more stuff down instead of just opening the Bible and reading it and doing
Yeah,
things like that. Um, I know recently I've started writing inside of my Bible.
yeah,
I've probably got like 3 or 4 just mine alone. My wife probably has like 4 or 5, and
yeah,
that's something that we gift to the kids. Like,
yeah,
hey, here's your own Bible with your name on it, and
yeah,
um, but I know that her and I were talking, and it'd be pretty cool, kind of like a legacy to leave around for them to find and kind of open up and get in their word.
yeah,
Um, as they're reading through, seeing your notes and how you saw it.
yeah,
Even if you did talk about it, but and seeing it written down later on, it's like that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Um,
Especially if you like pray for one of your kids and you're reading a verse, and then right next to it, you say, "Hey, I'm thinking of you, Cody, Sam, Seth, my
yeah,
wife, Lori. I'm thinking of you at this moment as I read this, and I know that you've struggled with this, but this just has so much meaning that Lord's speaking to me, and I hope it speaks to you." And like whatever, it's just
yeah,
like you're specifically talking about one of your kids or your spouse.
yeah,
It will have meaning later on. You don't have to like rush and say, "Hey, look at this,"
yeah,
because later on they'll see it,
yeah,
and it'll be powerful. Like they'll later on, my books are up in my closet somewhere, but later on they'll see those books and they'll go through them, and I think it'll have meaning for them.
yeah. Absolutely. That's pretty cool. That's a really awesome thing. It also helps you get in to speak with the Lord as well.
Yeah,
To write it down to help study, because I think that's a hard part too. Is yes, you can read through the Bible, but are you really studying it? Because there's some
right.
parts in the Bible you're just like, we mentioned earlier, I don't remember if it was on camera or off, but some of it's kind of dry.
Yeah,
You get through it and you're like, well, what does that even mean? Um,
right.
but when you actually get in and start studying it and writing it down, you understanding the meaning behind it. That's draws you closer to God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, it helps you, like you said, get some of that anger out, or get some however you're feeling. If it's something that you don't want to talk about today, but you write it down and something to go back to, and
Yeah,
like, hey, I know on this date, this was happening, and um, yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. It's one of the harder things to do is you know get up and spend the time with the Lord.
yeah,
Saying your prayers, reading the Bible, or doing whatever. Like I said, I'm on a Bible plan um, to read the Bible in a year chronologically. And one of the hardest times, it's hard to get up. You kind of roll out of bed. You're like, oh, well, I got to do
yeah,
this, this, and this, and
yeah,
then like you put it off, and it's like, man, a couple times driving into work, I'm like, well, God doesn't put me off.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to focus him first. So
I think everybody struggles with that, man. I
yeah,
mean, um, you go through those spiritual highs and lows where it's very easy because he's talking to you and you feel the presence of the Holy Spirit, and then there's some dry spells there. It makes it more difficult, but just
yeah,
keep at it.
yeah,
You said something earlier about, I wish I would have started that earlier, but I'll tell you, um, it's about how you finish the race, not how you start the race. And
yeah,
one of my talks that I talk about is like when I was doing marathons, and my dad is he's a big 400-pound guy. He
yeah,
wasn't really into running. He was Army, but he was always a little overweight. And then now he's a lot overweight. But when I was running marathons, I remember one time running the Charlotte Marathon, and I was miserable. My legs were hurting, and I just wanted it to be done. And I didn't know my dad was going to be out there, but he showed up, and I was
yeah,
running up this hill, and the theme from the Rocky song was playing, which I got motivated by the Rocky song. And so I started jogging. I was actually walking at that point, but I started jogging up this hill. And my dad happened to be standing up on top of the hill towards the end of the 26 miles. He was standing up there. He didn't bring the radio out, playing Rocky, but he was standing
right,
next to a guy that was playing it. And so I looked good to my dad,
yeah,
as I passed my dad and finished the race. He didn't see all of the pain and misery I'd gone over the last 5 miles. All he saw was that little bit. And
yeah,
so when he came to see me, he's like, "Hey, you did good." I was like, "Man, I was hurting." He's like, "Well, it didn't look like you were hurting to me. You finished strong." And
yeah,
that kind of like stayed in my mind. Like the same thing with God. We can beat ourselves up, and we can like say, "Man, I wish I'd have done this earlier, and I wish I would have done this." Well, you know what? You still got time because you're still breathing, and the Lord still got work for you. So
yeah.
it's never too late to get after doing kingdom work and making a difference for God's kingdom. And no matter when,
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're doing it right.
yeah, as long as you're doing it.
Yeah. And then what is it? Not repetition, but yeah, I guess repetition,
Yeah,
just the continuation, one of the things that we talked about at work a couple times is like, man, I'm having a hard time waking since I've retired. It's like I'm having a hard time waking up early in the
yeah,
morning.
yeah,
And one of the guys is like, well, dude, set your alarm 5 minutes early. Do that
yeah,
for a week. And then 5 minutes early, and then 5 minutes
yeah,
early. And you just get that going,
yeah.
and then eventually you're gonna wake up an hour earlier, and I'm like, yeah, that
Having
makes sense.
if you're really good at it, like I got to where I'm doing pretty good at it. But having an accountability partner too, where you're going through a study with a brother, iron
Yeah.
sharpens iron, man. That's so true. And so if you're studying something, and we do that a lot with some of the guys at church and some other guys, where
Mhm.
we're going through a book together, and so we get together and talk about it, and so it kind of forces you to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
But whatever it takes, man, like the Lord will speak to you. You just got to be listening, and you got to be paying attention. And we can't be afraid to show that we love the Lord, and that we're about the Lord. Like He's our main focus. I think the greatest sign of strength in your life as a Christian is your family, or your friends seeing you with the Bible open and you're studying, or even better, the greatest sign of strength is your family seeing you on your knees praying in the morning. Like
Yeah.
I used to, at my office, I would do my morning time, my quiet time, and then I would get on my knees and I would pray right underneath that flag right there,
Yeah.
which has a verse, Second Chronicle verse on it. But I would pray underneath that flag, and with my boys would wake up, like I wouldn't stop praying, because they could
Yeah.
pass by my office and they could see me in there, and it wasn't so I could say, "Hey, look at your dad praying, I'm close to the Lord." It was to set a tone of
Yeah.
that's what we're supposed to do, and that's how we're supposed to be. So it's important.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I had that conversation with my wife not long ago of instead of, well, not instead of, but in addition to, coming down to the office or just being in the living room in the morning, maybe sit at the table, open the Bible and read through it
Yeah,
and let the boys see you doing it,
yeah,
and just exactly what you just said.
yeah,
Um, so I think
yeah,
that's important, so that they can, you know, start, understanding that's what they need to do. Right.
Yep.
Being that good Christian role model leader in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So, you mentioned speaking engagements, and I know that you did that one
Yeah.
out there in Colorado. Do you get many speaking engagements?
I've done a few, but I haven't done that many.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get up to North Carolina. A good buddy of mine up there is a pastor at a church, and he's been trying to get me up to come up there and speak. And he has a prison ministry thing going on, so
Hmm.
I want to join him in that. But I haven't done a lot of it lately. I'd love to. I mean, if anyone says, "Hey, do you have time to come and speak to these men or speak to the church about what it means to be saved?" I'm all about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to turn that down. Um, that would be silly to do that if God puts that opportunity in front of me. So it's a little bit more difficult when when you've got a full time job and
Yeah.
stuff. And I started a landscaping business with my middle son as well. So really got two jobs going on, trying to help him manage that and do the job that I'm currently in.
Yeah.
But if if I get the opportunity to come talk at a men's group, especially, I'm all about it. Not
Yeah.
because not because I need to be heard, but people need to hear about the Lord
Yeah.
and what He can do in your life if you truly give your life to Him.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. That's awesome. That's good work. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And hopefully you can continue to do that. You get out there and speak because, again, like I said earlier, and I don't know if we were on camera or not, but
yeah,
I've passed around the one from Colorado to the guys. I'm like, dude, listen to this.
yeah,
This is good. Um,
yeah.
so
They have we didn't talk about it, but the habitual. I think a lot of men live in. We're tempted by habitual sin like pornography or things like that, and then things can affect your marriage. They can affect your walk, and
yeah,
one of the things I think it's prevalent in the church, and we really don't talk about it. And so I talked about it out there in Colorado, and especially guys that were deployed all the time, and it's just something that kind of started. It can creep into your life, and then when you allow that to happen, you get into a habitual sin situation where you're not close to your spouse, and
right,
you're living in sin. So how can you feel like, how can I be a witness when I have this sin going on in my life? And I think a lot of guys deal with that, and I'd love to talk about that because you can defeat it.
yeah,
And I remember the specific night that happened, that I was able to defeat it. And that's another probably a story for another time. But
yeah,
but men don't talk about that stuff. It's like, I don't want people to know that I'm not this perfect Christian. Well, guess what? None of us are perfect
you're
Christians.
right, yeah,
All of us have problems. When you can sit down and talk with a brother about some of the struggles you have, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be anger, whether it be pornography, whatever it is, if you can talk about it with somebody who's been there and maybe they've gone through it and they're on the other side of it,
yeah,
that's powerful. That's what we should be doing, instead of keeping this secret and not wanting anybody to know about it and thinking that you're the only one that this is going on with.
yeah. No, yeah, I agree. And it's I mean, we all. I
Yeah,
mean, if you listen to, so there's another guy that we listen, another podcast that we actually used to listen to on the way to church. Uh, and it was, oh man, how do I not remember this? Freakishly Tall Todd Friel. Um, his name's Todd Friel, and he does Wretched Radio. Pretty good. I'd recommend it. It's a
yeah,
really good podcast. But every Wednesday he does Witness Wednesday, where he goes out to colleges around Atlanta,
yeah,
Georgia, really, and he's talking to them, and he's like, we all sin,
yeah,
100%.
yeah,
He's like, I'm out here talking to you about this. I sin,
yeah,
and he's like, he would ask somebody, he's like, are you, what do you call somebody who takes something? And they're like, a thief. And, like, have you ever taken anything? They'll be like, no. Like, so you've never taken a penny off the ground or you're off somebody's debt. And they're like, yeah, well, you're a thief. You ever
yeah,
look at a woman with lustful thoughts,
yeah,
you're committing adultery,
yeah. If
and
you're
it's
married,
like,
yeah,
it's, or, it's difficult because when you
yeah,
think about it that way, I mean, every day,
Yeah.
it's something, and nobody's perfect, and I think that's a big stigma too with people who aren't Christian, and
Yeah.
they think that like, oh, you got to be perfect. It's like, look, bro, there was only one dude that was perfect,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he took the punishment for us,
Yeah.
for the things that I did or
Yeah.
I'm going to do. Um,
Yeah.
and God understands that we're not perfect, but you can continue to ask for forgiveness, man, and work on those things.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you said it's the habitual sin that takes you down a road where, you get to a place that you don't want to be. And I think that's what happens because we let something seep into our life and it's no big deal, but then it becomes a big deal and then becomes your focus. And then, yeah, you're no longer focused on Christ and where you should be. So
yeah,
that's the thing that, and that's what the devil looks at. Like the devil looks for those opportunities. I see how he does this and I know what to use against him to set that snare. The Bible is very specific. The devil is a lion as well that prowls around ready to set a snare to capture you in sin.
yeah,
And we have to be aware of that, and we have to help each other.
yeah, yeah. No, agreed. Yeah, and it's always good to surround yourself with people like that, and that's something we try to tell our boys all the time.
Yeah,
Not just our boys, but it's like, look, surround yourself with the good people,
yeah,
because otherwise they're just going to drag you down.
yep,
Um, and it's if you surround yourself with the like-minded,
yeah,
and they can lift you up, you know.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, it's okay. I mean, if you have, friends, but be that person that lifts that person up. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Understand, like, not all my friends are the best in the world, and the
yeah,
guys, but I don't know. You're there to try to lift them up, get them on the right path. So
yeah. I mean, like if you're not sick, you don't need a doctor, right? It comes
right,
straight out of the scripture. So your friends that you say are not perfect. Church is not perfect. I think people start looking for a perfect church, and guess what? It doesn't exist because people are in it.
yeah, yeah,
So we have a responsibility to be a witness to everyone, not just the people that not just the rich people or whatever.
yeah,
It's everyone. And so if you're thinking that you're going to find that perfect person you can hang out with in that perfect church that you can be a member of, and everything's going to be great, that ain't the way it works.
yeah, yeah, man. Some good information. That's some good stuff. I'm liking it. I
Yeah,
really hope hopefully this finds somebody who's kind
yeah,
of on the cusp, thinking about that, and
yeah.
hopefully these words like sink in,
Right,
because that is important. Um, and hearing guys talk about it, I don't think there's a lot of people out there that talk about it too much.
right.
Um, and yeah, so, but being a leader, you know, being a leader in the military, being a leader at your home, um, you know, I don't know, like, what are some ways that you, Bruce, as a Christian man, father, and husband,
Yeah,
ways that you lead your family? We talked earlier about you praying and letting them see you do that, not
yeah,
for the fact of like, like in the Bible it says, don't go
yeah,
around like, oh, I'm praying, I'm praying, I'm praying,
yeah,
but just on the off chance they walk by and they say, oh, okay,
yeah.
what are some other ways that you as a leader of your house,
Well, I think one of the most important things is it's not what you say, it's what you do. And
hmm
so there's this song. Actually, it's a song, but it's also a quote. I can't remember who I got it from, but it says your talk talks and your walk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. So basically, how you live your life, how they see you every day, even when you think no one's watching, but they're actually watching. That
yeah,
that that's more of a witness than you can ever be, just coming out and saying things that maybe are true or maybe not true. I could sit in front of a church and tell them all about what it means to have the Lord in my life, and then I could go and commit sin.
yeah,
Um, but if they see me setting that example, in my walk
yeah,
talks louder than my talk talks. That's what it's about. That's what it's about with your family. That's what it's about with your teammates. That's what it's about with the church people that are around you. Again, not perfect because none of us are perfect, but
yeah,
try to set an example. Um, don't miss an opportunity to show the integrity and the faith and the power of the relationship with Christ in front of your kids. And sounds like your wife is a strong Christian.
Mhm.
And my wife and I talk about this. We're studying the Bible together. You know, yeah, I can be a little bit in front of her as far in my walk, or my spiritual high might be a little bit more, or hers might be a little bit equally yoked and working together as a team. That's a powerful thing when you have a strong Christian couple working together and they're raising a family that understands what it means to love the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's just it. Like in a nutshell, if you say, what does it mean to be a leader? For me, it is setting the example.
Yeah.
If you set the example, just like Christ gave us the example of how we're supposed to be, we can never be like Christ. But if you
Right.
think, Francis Chan has a little thing that he talks about. I think it's in Crazy Love, but he talks about his mother-in-law was at this place, and they were at this theater and they were watching this thing, and it was a really risque kind of thing, and she didn't want to be there. He could tell she didn't want to be there. So he said, what are you thinking about right now? And she said, I'm thinking about what Christ would think if he came back at this moment and I'm sitting here in this theater watching this show. And so if you think about, what if Christ came back right now?
Yeah.
So like if you're in the middle of sin, one way to defeat sin before it happens is like, what if Christ comes back right now and I'm doing this?
Yeah.
That's a powerful way to, because the devil will flee from you when you start praying and you start thinking about, the Lord and stuff. And so setting the example in everything that you say and everything that you do, you're not going to be perfect. Don't let the devil tell you that you can't be a powerful witness just because you've sinned. Because that's what he tries to convince you. Oh, you got this sin in your life. You told this lie, or you've been doing this, and you're not supposed to be doing that. So how could you possibly be a witness? That's a lie.
Yeah.
We talk about the Lord and we talk about salvation until the day that we're all in heaven.
Yeah.
Don't miss that opportunity to talk to somebody that doesn't know the Lord.
Yeah.
And I do all the time. I'm not I'm not saying that because I miss those opportunities, and we all do. But if the Lord puts it in front of you, you take advantage of it.
Yeah. Amen to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we're coming up to the end here, man. I don't want to
Yeah.
keep you too much longer, but before we go, man, I guess one question, a book recommendation.
Yeah. So there is this book that called Point Man.
Yep.
And you may have read it already.
Mhm.
It's a really good book. It talks about leading. You obviously know what it means to be a point man. Like in Vietnam, as a point man, if you went out on a platoon, and you're going out and you're the point man, you're in the danger area. You're looking out for the team that's behind you. Well, point man is really leading the family. So from a perspective like that, it's what you have to do as a husband, what you have to do as a father, for girls and for boys, and how you're supposed to be. And so I think that's a really good book. It's an older book. It's been out there for a while. I've gone through it a few times with guys, but well, back then I think he was probably a major Marine in Okinawa.
Mhm.
Kind of led me through it together, and it was a powerful book. So that's one that I always love. There's a new book. I just read a book with a group of guys, Titus 10.
Okay.
Going through Titus, which Titus is a powerful book.
Yeah.
Paul's writing to Titus, but Titus 10 is a really good book to read. And it goes along the lines of how a man is supposed to be. And when I go and I do these talks and stuff, I'm specifically talking to men. Somebody said to me one time, like, "Well, how come you don't have anything, for the women?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, because I'm a man, and like the things that I experience in my life is, I'm trying to help men come to know the Lord and be close to the Lord so they can lead the family that they're supposed to, like the traditional family that we're supposed to have."
Yeah.
And so nothing again, like women. I don't talk a lot about what they need to do because I'm trying to let men know that they need to lead the family and be the example.
Yeah, I like it.
And
I'll have to check out.
that's not being a male chauvinist or anything. It's just like what the Bible tells us.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, perfect, man. I'll have to check out the Titus 10. I have read Point Man.
Yeah.
And I've passed it along to a couple people. Very good
Yeah.
book. There's two of them. There's an older one and then there's an updated one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I listened to, I can't remember. I listened to one of them. I mean, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's all about leading a family and being an example as a Christian man.
Definitely. Actually, I think you recommended Point Man to me.
I probably did because I reckon like when somebody asks me about a book, that's my first go-to.
Yep, I think you did. You, if I can find it in this office, I think I have it written down on a notepad.
Yeah, yeah, you probably do.
Yeah, but perfect. Well, Bruce, man, it's been great. Great talking, and really I hope you got a lot out of this, man. I did. I learned a lot, man, and maybe keep your date book open, and hopefully we can get you back on.
Yeah.
Talk some more because I know, like I said in the off camera, we could probably go another 2-3 hours.
Absolutely.
And just dig deep into a lot. So, and I do want to do that. So,
anytime, let me know.
Yes, sir. But thanks again for coming on. And yeah, man. Yeah.
All right, man.
Thanks, brother.
God bless you, my friend.
God bless you.
All right. Take care.
All right. See ya.
See ya.